When a manufacturer invests R&D in a development of a new drug, that manufacturer takes risk and is entitled, within reason, to recoup costs. But when you take a 100-plus-year-old drug like insulin and you suddenly jack up the price just because you can, I'm not saying you do, we had hearings on that, that actually puts lives in jeopardy. And so maximizing profits, nothing wrong with that, but not at the expense of people's lives, not at the expense of people's health. And I think PBMs as well as Big Pharma have an absolute obligation, and so do we up here, in protecting consumers, especially when the system doesn't work for them.
I appreciate my colleague across the aisle's remarks, but I think, with all due respect, you're missing the mark entirely. You're missing the mark entirely. Our country—
Well, not entirely.
Our country is sick.
What you're about to witness is stark differences in how Democratic and Republican congresspeople approach the issue of mega corporations squeezing every last red cent out of the American people.
Our country is sick. Why is Europe and Canada paying less? Because they don't have an enormous obesity problem, because half of them don't have diabetes. I mean, all of these are preventable diseases. They're all preventable diseases. Mr. Joyner, what % of the drugs that you sell treat trauma injuries, injuries of some kind, or genetic abnormalities? What %? 10, 15% of the drugs you sell?
I'm not sure.
I bet it's less than 20. We can all agree. So everything else is purely preventable.
Without citing evidence and without an answer from the witness, Timmons just runs with his own number to continue crafting the narrative that the American people are responsible for pharmaceutical and healthcare companies gouging us wherever they can.
I mean, so we have all of these problems with drug prices, but we have a demand issue. We have a demand issue. This country is sick. I have seen more people getting dialysis in the last 6 years. I go to these dialysis clinics at least once a year, and it's sad. And there's more of them, and there's more of them. And 95% of people that have diabetes that need insulin can exercise and eat better and not have these problems. So we're here to talk about who is making more money along the supply chain. Why don't we cut the supply chain off? Cut the need off. People need to be healthier. They need to take responsibility for their health. They need to exercise. They need to eat right. Our entire healthcare system delays death and treats sickness. We do nothing to facilitate health and wellness.
And this is how Republicans get away with the constant lying and moving the goalposts regarding issues they cannot defend. Yes, Timmons is correct in saying that we do need to focus more on preventative medicine, along with improving fitness and nutrition quality. But do you notice how he just completely absolves blame from any other factor responsible for our levels of diabetes and obesity, food deserts, poverty, working multiple jobs, corporate greed, pollution, deregulation, housing prices, and countless other factors? They all contribute to the problem far more than an individual's personal choices. But for so many conservatives, it's all boiling down to the usual, the classic personal responsibility scapegoat.
We talk about Europe. I mean, their diabetes rate is drastically less. So yeah, insulin's less. There's less demand. And the cost of insulin goes up because millions and millions of Americans are increasing the demand on it. 129 million people in this country have at least one major chronic disease. At least one major chronic disease. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, hypertension are the lead. All of those are very preventable unless you have a genetic abnormality. I'll even use myself as an example. I owned a CrossFit gym. I worked out every day, and I went to the doctor. I got some blood work done, and the blood work came back. She said, "William, you have a cholesterol problem." I said, "I'm 10% body fat. I work out every day. What's up?" And she said, "Well, what do you eat?" At the time, I was eating probably 16 ounces of steak a day. She was like, "Well, there's your problem." So I reluctantly changed my diet. I ate some fish, had some shrimp, ate some chicken, go back, get my blood work done, not a problem. Could I, without any penalty, have continued eating 16 ounces of steak every day and gotten a pill, lived on that pill for the rest of my life, and received no additional cost to me as a person? Yeah, I could. That's our healthcare system. There's no accountability. And you know what's crazy? That cholesterol pill that I take after a couple years, I'm probably gonna get a blood pressure issue. So there's a pill for that. And, let's just say I stop exercising, gain weight. There's a shot for that. I mean, this is not how our country needs to be operating. It's just outrageous.
Timmons doesn't understand that the vast majority of Americans don't have the luxury of time to spend at the gym, nor the funds to consistently eat nutrient-rich food like he did. This anecdote example is, nothing but political theater. It does nothing to aid the substance of his faulty argument.
The way to address our healthcare system is by accountability, personal responsibility. We have to incentivize health and wellness and not delay death and treat sickness. So I realize I'm on my soapbox here, but we have a major problem in this country. We have some of the worst outcomes of any developed country, and we spend 4 times more. Average spending, almost $5 trillion? And we have one of the least healthy developed population in the world. So I get it. We're fighting over drug prices, who along the supply chain is getting what and how they're doing that. We have to go to the root cause. We have to reduce the demand for all of these drugs. Even the military is having a huge problem. We're having to constantly reduce our standards because we cannot field a professional military. This is a national security threat. We have $35 trillion in debt. We're adding $1 trillion to our debt every 100 days. And we have workforce issues because people are unable to work because they're at the dialysis clinic or they're too sick. And again, 90% of all of this is preventable with diet and exercise. So I understand that we're fighting over drug prices and who along the supply chain, but we got to go to the root cause, and we have to get serious about incentivizing health and wellness and stop fighting over who gets what dollar as we delay death and treat sickness. And with that,
would the gentleman yield for a question?
Absolutely.
But I'm very drawn by your analysis, but would you take it one step further and say that Congress and the federal government should not be investing in big sugar, in big dairy, and in unhealthy agriculture practices that end up producing diabetes and unhealthy outcomes?
I do everything in my power to eat things that are from nature, and I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Nothing happens in a vacuum. Capitalism, specifically the monopolies and oligopolies we have in this country, are the main culprits for the healthcare crisis and the related massive drug price crisis. And the lack of real investment in overall health and wellness of the American people, that's where the actual crisis begins. A properly run single-payer Medicare for all system would certainly help massively quell the price gouging and price fixing. Can you imagine a country where the poor and elderly don't have to make an agonizing decision like choosing food over medicine or housing and utilities over a desperately needed visit to the doctor? Solving this crisis would also do something else. It would incentivize further innovation, research, development, and it would do what Big Pharma has worked tirelessly against. It would increase market competition.